Chapter 10. Night still cloaked the cliffside in a veil of quiet tension. The wind whispered through the trees, brushing against their skin like cold fingers. One by one, the group stood scattered, their faces pale with uncertainty and the lingering tremors of fear. Jade's gaze flicked around the strange terrain, worry etched into her brows. Elias remained still beside her, silent and tight-lipped, eyes scanning the shadows. Harper barely moved, hugging her arms close like the cold had found its way beneath her skin. Lachlan's jaw was clenched, yet his eyes betrayed the same unease that rippled through them all. Mallory stood slightly apart, eyes wide, lips parted as if holding back a question she didn't dare speak. Asher hadn't said a word since the witch vanished. His shoulders were tense, his stare fixed on the earth like it might give him answers. Then, from the far edge of the clearing, a figure emerged. He stepped forward with regal grace, the moonlight catching in his hair and the silver accents of his cloak. He walked with the effortless confidence of someone born into command, and utterly untouched by fear. "I am Prince Davan Mordrin," he announced, voice calm and deep, carrying like a lullaby over broken stone. He stopped a few paces before them, his expression composed, though his eyes sparkled with knowing. "It was I who scared that wretched witch away just now," he said with casual authority, as if it had been little more than an inconvenience. "You must be her student victims, from another realm, I presume?" He glanced over them, reading their confusion like open parchment. "Everyone in this realm knows of her. She's haunted these lands for centuries. But you're fortunate I arrived when I did." Then he folded his arms, his expression softening, though the flicker of exhaustion hinted at something deeper. Perhaps he'd faced her before. The group said nothing at first. They were still too stunned. The man before them didn't seem real. He stood tall and confident, like something carved from legend. With his sharp cheekbones and voice as smooth as enchanted silk, Prince Davan Mordrin looked like someone who could silence tempests with a glance. Too poised. Too perfect. Like a hero who'd stepped out of an old tale or a cursed dream. Mallory scratched the back of her neck awkwardly, unsure whether to thank him or question what kind of universe had royalty that looked like this. Her mouth opened, then shut again. Even Jade and Harper exchanged wide-eyed glances. A faint blush crept into their cheeks, not out of flirtation, but sheer disbelief. How dare someone look that good, Harper thought, folding her arms like it might defend her from the embarrassment. Honestly, it should be illegal. "Is it just me?" Jade muttered under her breath, "or is he, way too handsome? Hot? Nope, Harper thought dryly. That's definitely a royal sparkle overload." Mallory stood still, her thoughts unraveling like a spool of thread. Why do I feel judged by his jawline alone? She wondered. And why does his presence feel like a spotlight on all my flaws? Asher stepped forward first, his voice low but steady. "Thank you for saving our lives, Prince Davan," he said, though the words felt strange in his mouth, like something out of a book, not real life. "But can you explain what's going on?" He hesitated, glancing at the others before looking back at Davan. What did the witch mean when she said she made sure no one in this land can wield magic? Why would she go to such lengths? What is this place? A silence fell across the cliffside. Then Prince Davan inhaled. Not a simple breath, but something far heavier. It was the kind of exhale that dragged grief up from the bones, the kind of breath you take when you've carried too much for too long. His shoulders rose slowly, then dropped with the weight of centuries. Even the wind seemed to hush for him. Everyone around him felt it instantly. This wouldn't be a story of heroes and happy endings. This was going to hurt. A few centuries ago, Davan began, arms folding across his chest, that which was once a professor at a university in this realm. He spoke evenly, though a bitter edge curled into his voice. "Back then, everyone here could wield magic. It flowed through our realm like rivers, beautiful, powerful, and pure. She was brilliant, yes, a gifted magician. But her methods were disturbing. His gaze dropped for a moment, distant. She violated every sacred learning code, conducted experiments far beyond the boundaries of safety. Some say it was all in the name of research. Others say it was for fun. He shook his head once. One day, the university authorities found her lair hidden beneath the school, deep underground. What they uncovered were horrors. Relics cursed with torment, hexes written in blood, twisted magic that pulsed with something alive and unnatural. His voice grew colder, all of it pointing to one dark goal: to become the most powerful sorceress our world had ever seen. Not just in this realm, but all realms. The group remained still, barely breathing. So they acted. She was arrested, banished to the realm of nothingness, a place beyond time, where no magic flows. A prison of silence. But his jaw tensed, his eyes narrowing. But she found a way back. A hush fell again. No one knows how, Davin continued. Some claim one of her cursed relics opened a path. Others believe she crafted a spell before her exile. Whatever it was, she returned. But she was no longer just a sorceress. He glanced at them now, letting the truth land. She came back fused with something else. Something darker. Something not human. And with her return out came the curse. He looked up at the starless sky. The sun vanished. The skies blackened. And what came next was an eternal eclipse. No warmth. No daylight. Just endless twilight and moon-drenched shadows. Devin's tone softened, filled with sorrow. In our world, we need light to harness magic. It's not just metaphor. It's how our energy breathes. The sun, the stars, the rhythm of day and night, they are the source. He paused, his voice catching for the first time. But when she stole the light, she stole our magic. The others exchanged worried glances. Harper's arms tightened around herself. Elias's hands curled into fists. Even Lachlan's expression cracked. Over time, Davin said, quieter now, our people lost their power. The spark in our blood withered. We forgot what we once were. He gestured to the woods behind him, where the trees drooped like mourning willows. We live on moon-grown plants. Mushrooms. Wilted vegetables that soak up what little magic the eclipse allows. It's not living, it's surviving. Then his voice shifted. But when I was a child, I discovered I could still summon a flicker of magic. Just a spark. Weak. Fragile. But it was there. He exhaled again, this time with a tired smile. And so the whispers began. They called me the chosen one. The one who could break the curse. He chuckled once, but it was hollow. I didn't believe them. My magic could barely light a candle, let alone defeat her. But I trained. I studied forgotten scrolls, lost grimoires, journals written by ancestors who tried and failed. He met their eyes now, one by one. Each century, she lured students from other worlds. Always when the curse stirred again. Always to feed her hunger. They all died. A solemn beat passed. But not this time. His voice deepened, charged with quiet fire. This time, it's my century. My turn. I swore I wouldn't let history repeat itself. His fists clenched. I won't stand by while she takes more lives. So when I felt the magic pulse tonight, I ran. I followed it. He looked at them, Jade, Harper, Elias, Lachlan, Mallory, and Asher. And I found you. He drew in another breath. Somehow I reached you in time. Somehow. I made her run. And then he fell silent. The prince, brilliant, cursed, and burdened by destiny, stood against the darkened cliffside like a final shard of light. Devin's expression darkened, his arms folding tightly across his chest. "But don't be fooled," he said, his voice low and edged with warning. "She will return. Stronger. Angrier. And she will come for me, and for all of you." The group tensed. His eyes moved over them, piercing. "Because in her eyes, you're not just students," he continued. "You're the spark of something new. Your hope." He let that word hang in the air, heavy and sacred. "And hope," he said quietly, "is the one thing she can never allow to survive." He stood still then, watching their faces shift. Shock, fear, defiance. All of it flickered across their features like candlelight in a storm. Silence then. "So," Asher said, voice cracking slightly, "we've basically landed in a cursed apocalypse run by a psychotic ancient witch with a flair for dramatic exits?" His tone was dry, biting, but the tremble in his stance betrayed the truth. He was terrified. Mallory's eyes were wide. "This is insane. A world without magic." She blinked hard. "That's like coffee without caffeine." She rubbed her arms and looked around at the moon-drenched trees. "No wonder everything feels wrong here." Harper clutched her chest with a shaky breath. "Okay, but thank you," she said, turning to Davan. "For real. You actually saved our lives." She dropped her gaze after, voice softening. "I don't think I even realized how close we were to dying until right now." Lachlan glanced up at the bleak sky. "I can't believe this is actually happening," he murmured. "Accursed sky? Magic-starved people." He shook his head with a hollow laugh. "And I thought university stress was bad." Jade crossed her arms and scowled. "So she's some twisted, spell-happy maniac with an eternal night kink. Cool. Real cool." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "She sounds like a lovely mentor. Maybe we should have brought apples and a thank you card." Elias snorted and rubbed his chin. "Yeah, if you ignore the whole murdery, power-hungry lunatic bit." He quirked a brow. "Top-tier educator. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend." Asher raised his hands in exaggerated air quotes. "To whom it may concern, please avoid getting mentored by ancient cursed psychopaths. Side effects may include death, doom, and dramatic monologues." Mallory leaned into the sarcasm with an exasperated groan. "And don't forget, total annihilation of sunlight, joy, and serotonin." Harper bit her lip to suppress a laugh. "Imagine her Yelp review. Great hexes, killer ambience. Literally." Jade added with mock disdain, "If I could, I'd totally leave a 1-star rating. Tried to murder me, but points for creativity." Elias facepalmed. "Would have preferred a final exam, but I guess ritual sacrifice works too." He dropped his hand and folded his arms with a sigh. "This is our life now, huh?" Lachlan exhaled slowly, almost laughing. "Best part," he muttered. "She probably thinks we're the villains." A long, low howl split the air. It echoed through the trees, ancient, guttural, and too close. Harper flinched, clutching her arms tightly, her eyes darting toward the shadows. Elias jerked at the sound, nearly stumbling as he spun around in alarm. Lachlan instinctively raised his hands, trembling. Jade stood stiff, her mouth slightly open, breath shallow with awe and rising panic. Asher gasped, pale in the moonlight, while Mallory clung to her sleeves, every inch of her trembling with quiet terror. Back at the front, Davan turned slowly, his voice calm but grave. "Ah, yes," he said, as though only now remembering. "I nearly forgot to mention." A slight, ironic smile flickered across his face. "This realm," he explained, "is still very much inhabited." He stepped forward, gaze distant. "Magical creatures still roam freely beneath this cursed sky. Werewolves, vampires, dark fae, others without names anymore. This night belongs to them now." A shadow passed overhead, and the group instinctively moved closer together. We mustn't linger, Davan warned, scanning the treetops. It's far too dangerous. Come, we'll return to my castle. It's protected. For now. He walked ahead, urgency returning to his stride. My guards were scavenging when I sensed the witch's presence. They should be nearby. His voice dipped lower, almost mournful. There are only a handful of us left now. Death rates are high. Birth rates low. Even our strongest bloodlines have weakened in this eternal night. He paused, glancing back at the group. But you're safe now, he said gently. Under my protection. He offered the ghost of a reassuring smile. We'll get you warm. Federal. I'll explain everything you need to survive here. Then, more seriously, we must devise a plan soon, not just to resist her, but to get you home. If that's even still possible. He glanced up at the moon-choked sky. Time may not be on our side. Just then, a guttural snarl sliced through the night, deep and guttural. They didn't wait to find out what made it. The group followed Davan through a forest path wrapped in endless mist, branches curling like skeletal hands, the silence interrupted only by distant creature calls and the crunch of their own footsteps. And then it appeared. A silhouette loomed from the fog, ancient and massive. At first, it looked like a jagged mountain. But as they neared, they realized it was not a mountain at all. It was a castle. Davan's parents' castle. No, the castle. The ancestral stronghold of kings and queens long dead, his parents among them. A place that had once gleamed with magic and sun, now stood like a wound in the earth. Its black spires clawed at the sky like broken fingers. Stone walls stretched tall and hollow, worn gray by time and sorrow. Great stained glass windows, shattered in places, glistened faintly in the moonlight like tears that never dried. The hedges surrounding the castle had become twisted, lifeless mazes, thorned and skeletal. Once, they'd bloomed with celestial color. Now the soil was ash, drained of all joy. Yet, despite the desolation, the castle radiated a haunting kind of majesty. Its towering gates, its heavy iron doors, its ghostly banners. There was tragedy here, yes, but also pride. Power. The stubborn heartbeat of a kingdom that refused to die. It was beautiful in the way lost things are beautiful. Of a ruin. A sanctuary. A tomb. And yet, the only beacon left in a dying world. Chapter 11. The iron gates groaned open as Davan and the others stepped into the ruined courtyard of the royal castle. The night air was cool, heavy with silence, broken only by the echo of boots against broken cobblestones. The courtyard was a shadow of its former glory. Vines choked the crumbling statues, and cracked stone paths wound through what once had been lush gardens, now little more than skeletal remnants. The scent of old moss and ash clung to everything. A knight trudged across the yard, a heavy box cradled in his arms, his armor dulled by time. Others followed, Davan leading the students through the ghostly remains of regal splendor. Their steps were cautious, as though the very ground remembered too much grief. Each of them took it in differently. Asher kept his eyes down, too overwhelmed to speak. Mallory stuck close to him, biting her lip as she scanned the eerie architecture. Elias lagged behind, clearly uneasy, while Jade walked with guarded curiosity. Lachlan glanced at the cracked pillars and splintered archways like he was trying to piece together a forgotten legend. Harper hovered in the middle, her eyes wide, her hand brushing the moss-covered wall beside her like she was trying to wake it. Then, without warning, the shadows shifted. Inside, the castle was hauntingly still. Moonlight spilled through broken windows, falling in slanted lines across faded banners and silent halls. Dust floated in the beams like tiny ghosts. The smell of stone and time permeated the air. A knight crossed the corridor with another box, disappearing into a deeper chamber. Davin stood waiting, arms crossed, eyes distant. This, he said at last, his voice soft but sure, was my parents' castle, home of the king and queen of Noxmere. He turned to face them, his cloak catching the dim light like a shadow given form. It will be your sanctuary, at least for now, until we find a way to return you home. Mallory stepped forward, her voice full of sincerity. Thank you, Prince Davan, for all of this, for saving our lives. We owe you everything. He shook his head gently. There's no need for gratitude. I simply did what was right. Lachlan, arms folded tightly, furrowed his brow. But why our university? He asked, glancing between the others. Why was that witch haunting it in the first place? He hesitated, then added, how long has this been going on? Has she been possessing professors for centuries? The question hung in the air like fog. Asher stepped in, thoughtful. Every 100 years. That's when the curse stirs. Always during the autumn term. It's like something's waking up. He paused, folding his arms. Like clockwork. Something dark creeps in. Mallory nodded slowly, the pieces beginning to fall into place. I always thought those stories were just myths, she murmured. The ones they tell during orientation to scare the new students. Davin stood still in the cold air of the hall, his expression troubled, the flickering light from the sconces casting long shadows across his face. The witch, he began, voice low and steady. She's likely plotting something far worse than we've imagined. He crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. I believe her goal isn't limited to this realm or yours. I think she intends to cause ruin and suffering across many realms, fracturing the boundaries between worlds just to watch them fall. His gaze hardened. And now that she knows I can still wield magic, even in this cursed world where no magic should remain, she'll see me as a threat. He looked around at the group, letting the weight of his next word settle. She may come for me, for all of you. Or she may escalate her plans entirely, spread her destruction wider and faster than we can prepare for. He paused. I can't say for certain what her next move will be, but something's coming. I can feel it. A silence fell over the group, thick with the realization of how deep they were in. Harper's voice broke the quiet, soft and uncertain. I never even knew there were other realms beyond our own. Jade scoffed, folding her arms. Exactly. That kind of thing belongs in fantasy books or bedtime stories. Not. She waved a hand toward the crumbling Gothic castle. Real life. Elias gave a shrug. Or maybe in an advanced physics lecture, or, literally every sci-fi show ever. Harper let out a breathy laugh, though her eyes still held fear. So what you're saying is, we're living in an interdimensional thriller now? She gave a nervous glance to the high ceilings and darkened windows. Jade rolled her eyes. Next thing you know, dragons are real, and we're all secretly heirs to some forgotten magical kingdom. Elias grinned. Honestly, I'd be down. As long as I get a laser sword or something. Maybe a crown. No pressure. Davan chuckled softly at their banter, the first genuine smile on his face in some time. It is what it is, he said simply. He turned more serious, folding his hands behind his back. Before the curse, when this world still pulsed with magic, we could hardly reach beyond our own boundaries. The sorcery authorities of that time only ever dared to access the realm of nothingness, and even that was a last resort, used under the direst of circumstances. He looked out one of the shattered windows, as though trying to see the invisible threads between worlds. Other realms weren't something we could simply walk into. Not until she did. He turned back to them, voice quieter now, weighted with memory. She was the first to breach those barriers. The first to walk through the veil of realms as though it were made of mist. A pause. And ever since, everything changed. The moment hung in the air, heavy with revelations and haunted history. Davan stood awkwardly near the cracked stone railing, arms crossed as he drifted into silence. The tension of his warnings still lingered, until the quiet was interrupted by the soft shuffle of approaching footsteps. From the far side of the courtyard, a slender figure emerged through the veil of shadows. A young woman with downcast eyes and a tray of folded linens in her arms stepped into the dim light. Her posture was humble, careful, carrying the elegance of someone who had long learned to move silently through places she did not own. She walked with quiet purpose, her pace measured as she approached. The rustle of her simple gown and the creak of her soft shoes echoed faintly on the worn flagstones. Davan, noticing her, immediately straightened, then fumbled slightly, awkwardly scratching the back of his neck. "Handmaid Ilaria," he greeted, his voice softer than before. There was a note of familiarity there, perhaps even something gentler beneath the surface. Ilaria stopped and gave a polite, shy smile. "Your Highness," she said with a small bow, her tone warm but formal. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before shifting her weight nervously. Then, as quickly as she'd arrived, she turned to take her leave, disappearing through one of the archways with the quiet grace of someone used to vanishing. From the other side of the courtyard, Harper crossed her arms, brow lifted in a teasing arc as she leaned toward her friends. "Is that your girlfriend?" she asked, her voice sharp with mischief. She didn't even try to hide the smirk creeping across her face. Back by the stone balustrade, Davan froze. His head snapped in Harper's direction, eyes wide in horror. "No," he blurted, flustered, the word bursting from him like a slap of cold water. His cheeks flushed with a rare wash of embarrassment, and he rubbed the back of his neck with a sheepish expression. "She's not, I only know her because she's my mother's handmaiden." The explanation came out in a breathless tumble. That was all it took. The moment shattered into laughter. Harper was the first to crack, followed immediately by Jade, Lachlan, and Elias, all of whom erupted in unfiltered amusement. Asher and Mallory joined in, their laughter echoing through the old castle walls. "Careful, lover boy," Jade teased, her voice dripping with faux mystery. "She might be after you because you're the chosen one." From across the courtyard, Davan groaned and brought a hand to his face in theatrical dismay. "Ugh, don't remind me," he muttered, arms folding across his chest. "You have no idea how many girls have thrown themselves at me just because I'm a prince and the chosen one." Then, with a wry smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, his tone softened. "But with Ilaria, it's different. There's just something about her. We grew up together. She's sweet, gentle, and honestly..." He paused, the smirk fading into something more genuine. "She's amazing to be around." Mallory leaned in with a knowing grin. "So you do admit to liking her?" That lit the spark. Harper burst into giggles. Jade let out a cackle. Lachlan shook his head, laughing under his breath, and Elias snorted with delight. The courtyard echoed with the unguarded sound of amusement, a rare brightness in a world cloaked in magic and fear. Even Asher and Mallory couldn't help themselves, chuckling warmly as if they'd just witnessed Davan's most human moment yet. Davan let out a heavy sigh, his princely composure cracking just a little under their playful scrutiny. All right, he said with a resigned smile. "I'll call on one of the royal helpers to guide you all to spare rooms, if there are any left." His voice took on a more serious tone as he continued, posture straightening. "And please help yourselves to food if you're hungry. But be mindful, supplies are carefully managed in eternal night. This castle has known famine before, and we're not eager to relive that." A hush fell, the laughter dimming into silence again. Later, Davan added, "I'll call you in to discuss what we can do when she, the witch, returns. I've already started putting some plans in place. But first, I need to speak with my parents. If there's time, you may even get to meet them." He gave them a small nod, arms folded once more, his eyes distant, already thinking ahead to the next battle, the next conversation, the next hard decision. Just then, a figure stepped into the courtyard, a woman in royal garb, her manner warm and graceful. One of the palace helpers. She approached Davan and his guests with an air of calm joy, performing a light curtsy before addressing them all with a bright smile. "You are a great hope to us," she said, her voice filled with reverence. "Including you, Your Highness." She bounced slightly on her toes, clearly elated. Davan offered a respectful nod, his expression softening at her words. Before leaving, Davan turned back one last time, his expression stern yet sincere. "Oh, and remember," he said, addressing the group with quiet urgency. "In this realm, we're pretty much living in an apocalyptic world." The air shifted slightly with the weight of his words. "My ancestors protected themselves from magical creatures using spells and wards," he continued, his tone nostalgic. "But that age is gone. The curse has dulled what power we once had. Now, we rely mostly on non-magical combat. Survival techniques." A beat passed, the crackle of torches along the stone corridor casting long shadows behind them. "If we come under attack by vampires, werewolves, dark fae, the undead, or whatever else is still out there, follow the safety procedures from one of the royal helpers. And don't panic." His voice lowered just slightly, now almost gentle. "I'll see you all later tonight." With that, Davan turned and exited down the dim hall, the echo of his boots eventually swallowed by the cold, stone silence of the castle. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, "Don't worry, Harper," Lachlan said, stepping just a bit closer to her with a playful gleam in his eye. "I'll protect you from the big, bad werewolves." Harper rolled her eyes and looked away bashfully, biting back a smile. "Oh wow, what a gentleman," she replied dryly. "I'm sure your sparkling sarcasm will scare them off." Lachlan smirked. "What can I say? I'm deadly, with charm." Harper let out a laugh, unable to stop herself. Deadly delusional, maybe. Next to them, Elias leaned casually against a stone column, his gaze drifting toward Jade. He flashed her a grin. "And Jade," he said in his usual half-serious, half-sincere tone, "if anything happens, I'll be your personal undead bodyguard." Jade raised a skeptical brow, though a blush crept onto her cheeks. "A bodyguard who screams at mice," she teased. "Hey," Elias protested, hand over his heart. "Mice are terrifying. Zombies, though, totally manageable." That earned a genuine laugh from Jade. "You're ridiculous," she said, still chuckling. Meanwhile, Asher had turned toward Mallory, his tone quieter, more earnest than the others. "I'll keep you safe," he said, voice steady. "No matter what comes." Mallory looked up at him, eyes wide, her usual cool exterior softened. She lifted her chin, her voice a breath above a whisper. "Oh, Asher. Feet. Thank you. That means more than you know." They stood there for a moment, both blushing, neither looking away. Around them, laughter lingered in the air, but so did the hum of tension. Darkness hadn't left. It never did in this realm. But for now, there were still warm words. Still hope. Still people willing to protect one another, even in a world unraveling.